Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 185 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is Jackson Mummy. Really excited that you're with us right now. We are, as this episode is releasing, within the 2-week window to the upcoming February 2018 exam. That is really hard to believe. I sometimes get a little lost about where we are, which year is it, which exam is it? And then I look up and I go, whoa! It's February 2018, so I imagine some of you are having those same kind of moments, maybe some dreams, maybe some things that you're like, I can't believe it's so close. So we're going to have a relatively short message today in honor of the February bar takers. I know you got a lot going on, and I'm honored that you would spend some of that very precious time with us today. I've got a good message for you, I think. We're going to be talking about what I call Falcon Heavy, so stick around for that in just a minute. Now, if this is your first time on the podcast with us, we want to welcome you. We produce these episodes once a week, usually on Wednesday mornings they're released, and you can obtain the episodes in video form by going to our website, celebrationbarreview.com. For this episode, just put in /185 for the episode number, and you can watch the video in its entirety and have all the links and show notes. If you prefer to take your podcast as just listening to them, which is great, you can do that on Apple iTunes or on iHeartRadio or on Spotify, and probably some other ways too. I mean, it's out there in a lot of different places. You can also check out all of our past episodes by going to celebrationbarreview.com. You will see a link at the top of the page for podcasts. We've got all of the episodes going back now for 185 of them, so over 3 years worth of episodes along with show notes, so just check that out. And certainly we invite you to share these episodes with your friends and colleagues. That's how the podcast has grown over the years, and we appreciate so much that people are loyal listeners and do share these episodes with others. Now, for those of you that are taking the exam in just a couple of weeks, if you're looking for a specific message of what do you do with 2 weeks to go, I'm going to be less specific today, candidly, although I think it's very relevant to where you are. But if you want a little bit more specifics, I've done a couple of previous episodes before other bar exams that might be a bit more focused on the precise nature of 14 days. Episode 101, we were talking about the demons that can haunt your bar exam, and episode 132, talking about the perspective you needed at this stage. And we'll link up to both of those episodes in our show notes, but they're good episodes to go back and check out if you're interested in a little bit more detail about what do you do with a couple of weeks until the exam. Now, before I get to the core of our message today, I do want to invite all of you that are listening or watching to join me this coming Thursday on February 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern, which would be 4 o'clock Pacific time, for our free live webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. This is a look at the powerful, proven way to pass. We're going to take a look at successful case studies. We're going to break it down, show you exactly what successful students do to pass their bar, 4 steps that we're going to lead you through. And it's a great webinar. We've had literally thousands of people go through it, and the reaction is always very, very positive. We're going to offer it actually twice. I said Thursday the 15th. That's the first time. We will offer it also on Monday, February 19th at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, if those dates don't work for you, when you go to register, you will see a third option for an on-demand version of the webinar. This allows you to watch when you want. The only difference, of course, is I'm not on live, but I will be glad to answer questions, and you'll have a link there to email me. Now, you do need to register for these webinars. They are completely free. And to register, just go to our website on the homepage at celebrationbarreview.com. You'll see a button. If you happen to be watching today's episode as a podcast video, just scroll down to the bottom of the page and there's a link there. And if you're listening to it, you can jump into the show notes and you will see the link there as well. So easy to get up with us, and then I'll see you live on Thursday the 15th or Monday the 19th to talk about how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Well, let's get into our message for today. With a couple of weeks to go, I was going to talk about the Winter Olympics, but I realized as I was conferencing with students over the last week, I would make some Olympic reference, and I would get the equivalent of a bovine stare. Huh? What are you talking? Olympics? What Olympics? I mean, summer, winter. I'm pretty sure most of our students didn't know. So I thought, well, okay, that may be a little obscure. Apparently, the Olympics are not something bar takers are paying attention to, and I get that for sure. And so I decided I'd take a little bit of a risk because this is even more obscure, but it was a single event, not an ongoing event. But many of you are undoubtedly familiar with the fact that just a week or so ago, I think as this episode as I'm recording, but by the time this comes out, it'll be a little bit longer, that Elon Musk and his SpaceX organization and group launched what they called Falcon Heavy. Now, for those of you that don't know, Falcon Heavy lifted off from Florida, not very far from where we are in Celebration. We could actually see it during the liftoff, which was absolutely extraordinary. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and it was just bright and big, and the trail was huge, and the sound was amazing. I'm told that for those who were at the Cape and watched the liftoff, it was spectacular. What makes Falcon Heavy unusual was that it was the largest rocket ever to lift off. It's actually 3 rockets that are bundled together. We were at the Cape during the summer, and we saw it under construction waiting to go up, and it just dwarfs the imagination. It's so much bigger than you can possibly begin to comprehend. Even from a distance, it's huge. I can't imagine if you were anywhere near it, we could get within a couple of miles, but if you could get closer, it would just be extraordinary. And as many people now know, the payload, among other things, was an actual Tesla automobile. Talk about branding. I mean, Musk has really got it going on. In any event, it was the biggest rocket to go up in a commercial space venture for sure, and it was a tremendous success. And as I thought about the Falcon Heavy, I thought that there were some lessons for bar takers that might apply both to people taking the exam in a couple of weeks, but also to those who are looking further down the road to the July 2018 or the exams in 2019. And I thought that of the 4 lessons that I think come from this particular experience with Falcon Heavy, and I wanted to share those 4 lessons with you today. The first lesson is that the beginning is much harder than the ending. The thrust and the liftoff are much tougher. If you watch the video of Falcon Heavy lifting off, there is this enormous fireball. It's just beyond belief. And the sound is incredible. And there's all of this stuff going on. And the rocket is lifting off like inches. That's all. I mean, it's just like it's tethering. What's that right word? Anyway, it's just barely off the ground for a moment, and then suddenly, whoa, and it's up and on its way. I'm told that it takes so much energy to just move that rocket the first several feet, far more energy to move several feet from the beginning than it takes to move millions of miles near the end. I think the analogy here is pretty appropriate for bar takers. When we get close to the end of the preparation time, I'm always trying to caution my students that the process now should not be one of liftoff or heavy thrust. I use the example of landing an airplane, and I suggest to students that it's landing a plane under power, under control. You certainly don't want to cut the engines and drop like a rock, at least I don't, but you don't need the kind of thrust at the end that you need at the beginning. And as I watched the pictures of Falcon Heavy, I thought, how much energy does it take to get started? Well, I think this is where the message comes into play for people waiting for the July or later exams. Many of you are probably procrastinating, to be honest. You're just waiting. It's a little intimidating. Maybe it's a lot intimidating. Maybe it's just totally terrifying to you. And the thought of all the work you have to do to get started can just be overwhelming. It can feel like there's so much I've got to do, and then we tend to think I've got to sustain that level the entire time. That's not true. If you use the analogy of the rocket launch, there's a huge amount of energy expended right at the beginning, and then it becomes considerably less as the rocket begins to climb. I think the same is true in studying for the exam. It takes a lot of work for most people to make the decision to sign up for a bar review, to get their materials, and to do the first assignment. Now, we make our first assignment pretty easy. Why? Because we know that there's so much anxiety and there's so much tension around it that if we made it a hard one, people would just give up. I've never understood why some bar reviews try to blow their students out in the first hour and a half. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But the idea is that you want to put that energy into just getting up off the ground, off the pad, just lifting up a little bit and starting to get momentum. And as you begin to get momentum, what we see, at least in our course, is that people get more comfortable with the process, the approach. They get used to the idea of how they're going to study and work. They start to create a pattern or a rhythm for themselves, and it becomes almost automatic. And a lot of the studying that's done over a long period of time has this routine nature to it. Then we get closer to the landing. We get closer to the exam date. And some people go back into liftoff mode. This is a huge mistake. Look, if you're taking the exam in a couple of weeks, I'm just going to tell you straight up, cramming and studying like that isn't effective. I was at an event this weekend, so a few weeks before the exam, and I was introduced to someone who is a repeat bar taker, apparently, in the state of Florida, who's taking one of the big box bar reviews, but has already failed the bar exam, apparently, previously in Florida. Licensed attorney from, you guessed it, New York. And she was telling me about her New York experience and her bar exam experience in Florida, and it all made sense to me. And then she said, well, I have to leave now. It was a dinner. She said, I have to leave now so I can go memorize some more. And it broke my heart because what I really wanted to say to her was, memorizing, cramming right now won't do you any good at all. But instead, I just smiled nicely and wished her well, because I do wish her well. But I think that for many people, it's a misunderstanding of the process at the end to think that by cramming one more outline, memorizing one more rule, learning one more mnemonic, that you're going to be better off on the exam. I am constantly telling our students that it is a counterintuitive process. You need to lean into the test, you need to relax, you need to be intuitive, much more than you need to be pressing and pushing and trying to do one more thing. In fact, I'll suggest to my students for the weekend before the exam that they pretty much cut it off in terms of their studies and concentrate on sleep, rest, maybe a little bit of time at the spa, quiet walks, meditation, prayer, all of the things that get them physically and emotionally and mentally ready for the exam, rather than read one more outline. You see the difference? I think the read one more outline approach suggests that you're just lifting off. It's that amazing thrust of energy. The problem is, you get to the exam, you've used up all the fuel in your tanks, you're in big trouble. And my goal is that people have the ability during the exam to be at their best. Does that happen if you're wiped out and exhausted? I don't think it does. So to me, it's really a good analogy to think that at the beginning of your studies, maybe it's like Falcon Heavy, but near the end of your studies, it's more like the shuttle coming back in for a nice smooth landing. When the shuttles come in and they land in California or Florida, they're moving fast, no doubt, but they are not putting huge thrust behind what they're doing. And I think that's the point. They're gliding in to their landing. So that's the first lesson for me. The second lesson that I get out of what Elon Musk did is he's a very smart guy when it comes to the business side of these things. He's reusing the rockets. Now, that's pretty amazing when you think about it, because here are these massive, massive rockets, and your first thought is, okay, so you do it once, but how do you do it twice or 3 times or 20 times? They're planning to use Falcon Heavy to bring materials and passengers up to the space station and beyond, I guess. How can they do that? Well, apparently what they've done is that after the 2 side rockets, which are bigger than any regular rockets, after they've been used to get that initial thrust, those 2 rockets separate from the main rocket, and they are glided and guided back in to a safe landing back on Earth. They come in over the ocean, and it's amazing. They recover them, and they grab them, and they can reuse them. I like this idea, recycling rockets, right? We can be efficient. So the message, I think, for a bar taker is make your studies efficient right now. Now, some people who are studying at this point are wildly inefficient. They're jumping all over the place. They're treating every subject like it's brand new, like they've never seen it before. One of the biggest mistakes I think you can make at this stage is to take a topic and say, I'm going to study all of torts or contracts again, top to bottom, everything. You don't need to do that. You know some parts of every subject. The key right now is find out what you don't know and work on that and improve your performance. But to go through the entire subject every time just doesn't make much sense to me. It's not efficient. And yet I see people who are constantly acting in this inefficient way of studying. They try to grab it all and do it all as though they only get one chance, one bite. And I think that that's a mistake when it comes to studying for the bar. The more efficient you can be, particularly at the end of your studies, the better off you'll be. If you're spending, again, to go back to our first point, if you're spending 12 or 15 or 18 hours a day studying, how good are you going to be on the test? I think the answer is not very good, or certainly not at your best. If you're efficient, if you conserve your fuel and you use your time wisely, you'll be much better off in the exam. We recommend to our students at this stage, 2 weeks out, to be spending a maximum of 9 hours a day, and that's the absolute top. And we've got lots of students spending 3 hours a day. And you say, well, you couldn't be ready with 3 hours a day. Sure you can. If you start early and you reuse your efficiency and you build in repetition, then you're way better off. See, Musk knows that if he can reuse the rockets, repetition is good. It works. Well, in learning, repetition is good as well. Instead of memorizing, the best way to learn is to take a body of material, to become familiar with it, and then set it aside, and then bring it out and repeat it. And then put it aside, bring it out, and repeat it. When you rinse and repeat like this, you become more efficient, you learn the material, and you're able to use the material in a way that someone that's force-fed material into their brain to cram it will never be able to do. So I would say that students in our course are probably more efficient. They're using photo reading, they're using a series of writing techniques for the performance test and the essays that make their word count higher but more efficient, less issue spotting, less waving their arms wildly about things that don't matter. It's all built around efficiency. And you might say, well, it doesn't matter. The idea is just to get more rules on the page, put more words out. No, that's not true. The practice of law is not about that at all. It's about efficiency, judicial economy, getting things done, get to the point, get to the heart. And I would say if you're not doing that on the bar exam, you're at a significant disadvantage. So it's a good lesson to take to heart, to be efficient and to reuse your skill set and to reuse the tools that you've got instead of approaching it like it's all or nothing one time. The third lesson I really love. If you've seen the pictures of the Tesla vehicle, they took a Tesla Roadster, and that was on top of the big middle rocket. And what they did is they got the big rocket up into orbit, and then they released the Tesla out into space. No gravity, right? So it's floating along, where apparently it's going to float for millions of years. And this is really kind of cute, I guess, in a weird way. Musk put in a stuffed astronaut as the driver. And then in the console, if you've ever seen a Tesla automobile, there's an electronic console right in the middle. And in the console, it says, "Don't panic," with an exclamation point. You gotta love it, don't you? And I thought, well, okay, that's just too good to ignore for the bar exam. Look, lesson number 3 is don't panic. I know that a lot of bar takers think that they're supposed to panic. They think it's supposed to be miserable and awful and terrible, and they expect it and they anticipate it, and then bad things happen. Now, last week in episode 184, I talked about self-doubt and worry and anxiety. And if you haven't heard that message, I encourage you to go back and check it out. But that anxiety that comes up is an anticipation of the future. And to Elon Musk's, stuffed astronaut who will be circling the planets for millions of years, I think it probably would be appropriate to say, don't panic. You're in for the long haul. You're in for the long ride. But a lot of bar takers really don't do that. They really approach it as, I'm supposed to panic. I'm supposed to have all of my nerve endings on fire. I'm supposed to be wired to the extreme. I'm supposed to be as pumped up, caffeinated, energized, crazy as I can be because that's what it takes to pass the bar. That's not so. And the people that tell you that really, I think, are doing you a disservice. If you actually look at who's successful on the exam, it's not those people. It's the people that come in quietly, no drama, they just do their work, they leave, they get their results, and they go on, pass the bar, and do good things. It's the people that create the drama that keep failing. It's the drama majors that are there, the ones that are crying at the doorway to the exam, the ones that are having a fit about where they're seated. It's the ones who are wired up about, oh my God, did you see the issue of X in the morning session? Well, it's over. It doesn't matter now. Those are the people that typically don't do well on the exam. And you remember them from law school. You know them from, the world that you live in. They're not people that most of us want to be around most of the time. Look, at the end of the day, after you're a member of the bar, you still have to work with clients of some sort. And if you're really an obnoxious, horrible human being, if you are a complete drama, center of drama all the time, people get tired of it very quickly. It's tough to attract clients. It's tough to keep clients. It's tough to work with others. It's not a good way to live. And frankly, it doesn't help you when you're taking the bar exam. There's nothing in the bar that rewards that kind of behavior. And yet there are people who think that's what I've got to do. And so instead of being intuitive and not forcing things, they try to force everything. They try to push through everything. I was reminded this week of the X-Men character. I think he's called Juggernaut, the one that puts his head down and he runs through walls. Now, I love the idea of being an unstoppable force, but sometimes it's not necessary to run through walls. I mean, there's a door there. Just open the door and walk through it. You don't have to be breaking down the walls all the time. And sometimes I think at the end, people think, I've got to run through that wall. Well, sometimes you do. And, I've talked about that in other contexts, but really sometimes all you got to do is go, oh, I don't have to go through that wall at all. I can walk around it or go through the door or, go the other direction. There's a lot of different alternatives, but sometimes people panic and they do these really foolish things to themselves. Look, if you're struggling with panic and fear, definitely check out the episode last week on anxiety, because it's just so critical that you take control of your emotions. But here's my other point. You're in control and you're okay. There is no one else doing this to you. There is no one forcing you to be crazy right now. I promise, there's no one forcing you to be crazy. And if you feel like you have to be crazy in order to take and pass the bar exam, you've been seriously misguided at this point, which of course just makes you crazier. I realize that. I'm not trying to do that to you, but I am just trying to be a voice of reason in a world of completely insane people. There you go. Lesson number 3, float, don't panic. And then my 4th lesson, the final lesson, man, don't you love Musk? I mean, he is something, right? This guy is audacious. He dares to dream and dream big. And that's my 4th lesson. You got to dare to dream big. For all that I've said about not having to run through walls and not having to put all this power and energy into the end of the process, you have to dare to dream big. You've got to want something out of this. The people that don't succeed on the exam fall into 2 extremes. They're the panic mode people, and then there are people that just absolutely don't care. They don't have a reason for wanting to pass. They're just doing it because they went to law school and they got to take the exam and they've got no idea what they're going to do or what they want to make happen. I oftentimes remind our students that on the other side of the bar is a client, maybe many clients, who are just waiting for this person to become their bar member, their lawyer. They don't know they're there. They don't know them by name, but they know there is someone who will be their lawyer, and they're waiting for you. And you've got to care enough about them. And I'm not just talking about individuals. I mean, it may be a corporation. It may be a merger and acquisition. It may be, internal counsel or house counsel. It doesn't really matter. The point is that somewhere out there, there's some entity or person that needs your services. They need the uniqueness that's you. I've not met any 2 law students or bar students or lawyers who are equally identical in any respect. We have certain characteristics, but we're all unique. And so you bring a certain uniqueness to your membership in the bar, some more than others, but we all have that. The problem is that some people stop dreaming. They don't think it's possible. They failed the bar multiple times, or they've been told all along they can't do it, or they see the statistics, or they recognize that the school they went to didn't do very well, or they look at their racial identity or their gender, and they say, I just don't see many people that look or sound like me in the bar. That is all the more reason to be dreaming big, to believe that you can do it. If you don't have those dreams, very little happens for you. Very little that's good will occur here. If you go to the exam expecting a failure, you'll get a failure. I can almost guarantee it. If you go in a panic mode, you'll almost certainly fail. But if you go really not caring what happens, well, you'll fail too. You see, in order to be good at this, you got to care enough to want to prepare to do things right. Now, the fact that you're listening or watching to this podcast tells me that this is a self-selected audience. You are not going to be the people that go, I don't care, because you wouldn't be listening. But you probably know some people like that. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is that those individuals don't dare to dream big enough. Somehow the dream got taken away from them. Or maybe they just never thought big enough to think about dreaming. But you did. And you can. And if you inspire others, if your life story could be meaningful, then you need to dream big. I interview lots of our students who are successful after the bar exam, and I think so often they tell me that they were inspired to hear other people's stories, and now they want to share their story. They want to give back. They're not bragging. They're in fact, most of these people are pretty humble, but they really want to share what it was like. Even the people that failed multiple times, many, many times, and then passed. Well, why would somebody put themselves out there like that? Because they know that having a big dream means you got to take risks. You got to do some things that are uncomfortable. And if they can help encourage and support somebody else who wants to dream big, then they know that that's worthwhile. That creates a better world, creates a better bar. It's better for all of us. If you don't dream big, you got no business going to the bar exam. I'll just tell you. Because this bar is for big dreamers. You got no business sending up Falcon Heavy if you don't have a big dream. And I mean, he had a big, big dream. And I don't think we're anywhere close to what Musk is going to do with all of the different things that he's got in mind. But isn't it exciting to watch somebody who's willing to put it all on the line? There was no guarantee of success. In fact, there were a lot of people that said this rocket launch was going to be a major dud. It wouldn't work. And if you've watched the videos on YouTube of him at the moment when it's clear that the rocket is in fact going to clear the launch pad and be up and working, it is absolutely breathtaking just to see the incredible joy on his face. Why? Because he dreamed a big dream and he's seeing the first step of that come to fruition. There is nothing better for me as a teacher than to get that call or email or text from a student at the moment results come out that says, we did it. We made it happen. It's real. It's happening. I've passed, right? The big dreams are just starting. They're not ending. This is the beginning. And if you see this as the beginning of your story and not the end of your story, it makes all the difference in the world. Well, those are the 4 lessons that I take from Falcon Heavy. Make sure that the beginning is separated from the landing, from the takeoff. That was our first lesson. The second lesson was be efficient, reuse your skills, repeat what you're doing. The third lesson, don't panic. And the fourth lesson is dare to dream big. If you can do those things, I think you're in really great shape, whether you're taking the exam in a couple weeks or months down the road or even next year, because all of these qualities really lead to one thing, and that's success at whatever you're aimed at. Look, many of us are not Elon Musk. I would say probably almost none of us. But we all in our own way can have these amazing accomplishments and big dreams, and we can be the authors of our own story and our own success. And that's what I wish for all of you. And so I hope that you will take to heart the story of Falcon Heavy and make it your story as you prepare and study for the bar exam. Well, that's our message for today. Hope you enjoyed talking about rockets and being a rocket man. I love it. Don't panic. In any event, in addition to not panicking, we want to remind you to join me on Thursday, February 15th or Monday, February 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time for a live presentation, how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Just be sure to register on our video page or on our homepage at celebrationbarreview.com. For those of you that are studying and getting ready for the exam in a couple of weeks, keep at it. Keep your head down, keep working. Good luck to all of you. We'll be back next week for some final thoughts right before the test. And for everybody else, it's a great time to get started, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.